When Sony released the PlayStation Vita in late 2011, it looked like the future of handheld gaming. At a time when smartphones were still relatively limited, the Vita offered something no other portable device could: console-level hardware in a handheld form factor. It had a sharp OLED screen, dual analog sticks, front and rear touch input, motion sensors, and enough power to run games that looked closer to the PlayStation 3 than anything else you could carry in your pocket. On paper, the Vita should have succeeded. Instead, it quietly failed, and in doing so, it marked the end of Sony's involvement in the handheld gaming market. To understand why the Vita failed, it's important to understand what Sony was trying to accomplish and where that vision slowly unraveled. Sony entered handheld gaming with confidence. The original PlayStation Portable, or PSP, launched in 2004 and went on to sell over 18 million units worldwide. While it never surpassed Nintendo's DS, the PSP proved that Sony could compete in portable gaming. It attracted third-party developers, sold well in multiple regions, and established a strong identity as a powerful, multimedia-focused handheld. The Vita was designed as its successor, but also as a statement. Sony didn't want to just compete with Nintendo, it wanted to redefine what a handheld console could be. From a hardware perspective, the Vita delivered. Its OLED display was widely praised, its controls felt premium, and its internal specifications were impressive for the time. Games like Uncharted Golden Abyss, Wipeout 2048, and Gravity Rush showcased what the device was capable of. Early reviews were positive, often highlighting how ambitious the Vita felt compared to the other handhelds on the market. But hardware alone doesn't determine success. One of the Vita's first and most damaging problems was cost. Not just the price of the console, but everything surrounding it. While the Vita launched at a competitive price, Sony made a controversial decision to use proprietary memory cards instead of standard SD cards. These memory cards were not only mandatory for saving games, but also extremely expensive. In some cases, a Vita memory card could cost nearly as much as a budget handheld console on its own. For many consumers, this immediately raised the barrier to entry. Buying a Vita wasn't just about buying the device, it meant committing to an ecosystem that felt unnecessarily restrictive and costly. This device alone didn't doom the Vita, but it created friction at a critical moment when the platform needed momentum. Another issue was Sony's unclear positioning of the device. The Vita existed in an awkward space. It was marketed as a powerful gaming console, but also as a multimedia device. It supported apps, music, video playback, and even remote play with the PlayStation 4. However, Sony never fully committed to any single identity. At the same time, smartphones were rapidly improving. Casual games were becoming more sophisticated, app stores were exploding, and mobile gaming was becoming mainstream. While smartphones couldn't match the Vita in raw gaming performance, they offered convenience, accessibility, and a massive audience. Sony found itself competing not just with Nintendo, but with the devices that people already owned. The real turning point, however, came from software support, or rather, the gradual loss of it. Early in the Vita's life, Sony released several high-profile first-party titles. But as time went on, those releases slowed dramatically. Major franchises that had defined Sony's brand were no longer appearing on the platform. New Uncharted or Killzone entries never arrived. This sent a clear message to both developers and consumers. If Sony wasn't fully backing the Vita, why should anyone else? Third-party developers took notice. As sales stagnated, fewer studios were willing to invest in large-scale Vita projects. Many developers moved on to safer platforms, where the audience was larger and the return on investment was more predictable. Over time, the Vita's library became increasingly dominated by smaller indie titles and niche Japanese releases. While these games were often excellent, they weren't enough to sustain a mass-market handheld. Internally, Sony was also changing. Around the same time the Vita was struggling, Sony's home console division was experiencing a resurgence. The PlayStation 4 launched in 2013 and quickly became a massive success. Resources, marketing, and attention flowed to wherever the momentum was. From a business perspective, it made sense. Supporting a struggling handheld platform required long-term investment with uncertain returns. Supporting a booming home console ecosystem did not. Slowly and quietly, Sony began to step back. Marketing for the Vita diminished. Public statements about the platform became vague. New hardware revisions and major announcements stopped altogether. While Sony never officially declared the Vita dead, its actions made the situation clear. the company was no longer committed to the handheld market. By the late 2010s, the Vita was effectively on life support. Production ended, first-party development ceased, and Sony formally exited the handheld console business. The Vita became a niche device, loved by a dedicated fanbase, but abandoned by its creator. The failure of the PS Vita was not the result of bad hardware or a lack of potential. It was the result of strategic missteps, unclear positioning, and a gradual withdrawal of support at a time when commitment mattered most. Sony didn't lose the handheld market because it couldn't compete. It left because the market had changed, and the cost of competing no longer aligned with its priorities. In that sense, the PS Vita wasn't just a failed console, it was the last chapter in Sony's handheld experiment, and a reminder that even great technology can't survive without long-term belief behind it. If you found this video interesting, you can support the channel by subscribing. Discontinued explores the products and ideas that shaped tech history, and why they vanished. Thanks for watching.